Dr. Kwadwo Kyeremanteng is a distinguished medical professional serving as the department head of the ICU at the Ottawa Hospital. With a deep-rooted passion for driving positive change in healthcare, Dr. Kyeremanteng is not only an advocate for moral courage and leadership, but the voice behind solving healthcare. You can find it on Instagram. It's on all the platforms for podcasts. It's amazing. Recently, he became an author of Unapologetic Leadership, Finding the Moral Courage to Lead, and it's a guiding light for current and aspiring leaders, emphasizing the importance of ethical decision-making and steadfast leadership in challenging times. Could not be more applicable. So welcome, Kwajo.
That was the introduction of champions, and I'm blushing a little bit at the reference to how long we've known each other. We haven't seen each other in a long time, but I really appreciate you reaching out and asking me to speak on such a topic. It's amazing the work that you've done so far. So thank you so much. I am just going to share my screen, folks. And I'm sorry I'm not there with you. But it sounds like things are taking off with a bang. So I really commend APS for all the work they're doing. Liz and I went back and forth on actually what to talk about here, because this is a pretty special group that's in the audience. You got a lot of people, multidisciplinary, that are looking to improve patient outcomes, but the potential that's in the room right now and virtually is incredible. I apologize, I didn't catch the name of the person that was talking about the changes that we're making for chronic pain and the reach out they're doing in Alberta, but that's incredible. And the reason I wanted to talk to you guys about this topic, our journey through solving healthcare, how our small team has been able to do, in my opinion, have some significant impact, is because I want everyone in this room to feel inspired that they can be a change maker. They can be someone that can improve patient outcomes at scale, improve education at scale, because we all have it within us. If I could do it, y'all could do it. So it starts off with a story with young DJ. He is a ICU patient. He was a trauma patient that was in his 20s, ended up paraplegic, ended up needing a tracheostomy, and he was heavily reliant on chest physio to be able to liberate from the ventilator. So he was unfortunately had a prolonged admission, but the physiotherapist and the respiratory therapist went above and beyond to be able to make sure that DJ gets through and eventually gets off the ventilator. But unfortunately, we're in an era of cutbacks and we go into a long weekend and he doesn't get the physiotherapy. He has a mucus plug and lands back in the intensive care unit and has this huge setback. 3 weeks, extra 3 weeks in ICU, and you think about the effect it has on him, effect it has on his family, the cost that it has to the system when we're looking at $3,000 a day, all from our short-sightedness of cutting in an area that, in my opinion, is some of the most valuable allied health professionals that we need. And so there was a need to try and do something about it. I had a similar experience. I'm a palliative care doc when I'm not in the ICU. And we had this incredible regional pain program. We had patients that were having complex pain that were, prior to getting the regional pain addressed, they were on multiple agents, sometimes infusions of ketamine and other opioids, and obviously multiple medications orally. And you would see this dramatic impact of them getting their spinal and the quality of life that has improved, the ability to get home safely. And once again, in an era of cutbacks, we're seeing that this program gets cut. So right now in my city in Ottawa, we don't have a regional pain program, and people as a result are suffering, in my opinion. And once again, from that short-sightedness in terms of trying to make the budgets line up. So what do we do about it? We formulated this resource optimization network. It's a multidisciplinary team of researchers that were focused on how do we reduce spending and at the same time maintain or improve care. And we put together a bunch of docs. We got pharmacists, residents and fellows, health economists, nurse practitioners. We really wanted it to be multidisciplinary to be able to address some of these issues. And because of my area of my clinical area, we focused on critical care and end of life care and within in palliative care. And honestly, we were doing amazing. We were doing amazing work. We published. We're close to publishing about 100 studies now. But the thing that what I found troubling is, despite showing where we could save, nothing was changing. Absolutely nothing was changing, in my opinion. Same old issues, same old problems, same old short-sighted budget cuts. And so we talked to our team and we're like, how do we get the word out there? How do we talk about these issues and reach more folks that can make an impression? Because when you think about it, for those that are in research, especially, we'll say we go back 5 years, you put a paper in an impact, a journal that has an impact factor of say 5. How many people are reading that? Like 100 people, 500 people. Whereas we thought to ourselves, we gotta think of a format where we can get to more ears. And so we decided to do a podcast, Solving Healthcare. We launched it in 2019, and my life changed after that personally, and it also, like, everything changed after that. It was really rewarding to see that we could start having conversations about some of these issues, and we felt like we were getting some momentum. We were covering topics such as advanced care planning, topics such as virtual care back in 2019, to how do we reach more Canadians when it comes to excellent programs. And so it felt like there was a lot of momentum happening. And then unfortunately, March 2020 happened. And I think some of you in the room could appreciate how crazy a time that was. I was there for our very first ICU patient in March 2020 at the general ICU. And it was scary. It was a very, we didn't know what to expect. We weren't sure, are we going to be another Italy? Are we going to be overrun? Are we going to be bringing COVID? Are we going to get sick? Are we going to be bringing it home to our loved ones? There were a lot of unknowns, and there was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of information being thrown at people everywhere. And so one of our big objectives was to give people information in a way that they could digest, not just strictly being about fear, but what can you control? What can we control during this situation? Well, what's the value of getting vaccinated? What are some of the measures we could do to stay healthy and protect ourselves? So that became a real focus, and a very rewarding focus, actually. And then one of the key things that we unfortunately were seeing more of was there was sequelae to our restrictions. So we saw, unfortunately, cancer screening going down, elective surgeries going down. So we wanted to be able to highlight some of these issues and come up with solutions. And one of the ones that I really hold dear to my heart, I'm a father of 3, and Adrienne Matheson, she's a close friend of ours, and also her kids are have kids the similar age. And what she was seeing in terms of child mental health was a huge concern, seeing increasing anxiety and depression, eating disorders. so we made a mission to try and really highlight some of these issues. And then on top of that, we were seeing that kids were really struggling just to make, and their families were struggling to make their ends meet. You know, if you're on the margins and you are a single mother, and you got 3 kids at home, and you have to decide between educating your kid or going to work to make sure you have enough food on the table. This is extremely challenging times for many. And so what we did was we started a charity, Bridges Over Barriers. This was one of our main fundraisers. What About Bob? For those that were old enough to catch that reference, we really wanted to try and serve the community. How do we serve the kids and their families? And what we did was, and this is a key theme that you're gonna hopefully appreciate, is we try and focus on action. We don't contemplate too much. We hustle. We just do it. And this conversation we had was in March or April around the families that were struggling. We set up this charity within about 3 weeks. We linked it up with our school board locally, and this fundraiser here raised about 20,000. Ultimately, since 2020, we've raised we're approaching 230,000 to serve the kids, to make sure that they have the basic needs, to make sure that if the kid wants to go to a soccer camp, which they can't afford, we'll help fund that. Like, we just really want to eliminate barriers and allow kids to not only survive but thrive. We saw a lot of COVID affect people disproportionately, especially racialized communities, which was as a person of color, I must say, it was tough to see throughout the pandemic. And at times, at least in Ontario, we felt that a lot of our measures weren't addressing some of our disproportionate or some of our racialized communities, some of our marginalized communities. And so what we thought to do aside from just bringing up these issues and bringing them to light, was we recently got a grant to try and support a Black community locally. This is what we saw a lot of was poor metabolic health as being a driver of severe disease with COVID. And so we thought to ourselves, if we're thinking about root causes, why don't we try and get to the community, hear from them how we can help, and do our best to try and reverse their metabolic disease. If they're pre-diabetic, diabetic, what can we do to get them healthier in a way that is they're open to try and get them healthy and avoid severe outcomes, or seeing, for example, seeing someone like myself in an intensive care unit. So this was luckily with 2 agencies that are supporting this. We've been funded about $200,000, and this should be taking off in the spring of 2024. So when George Floyd happened in May 2020, obviously this was troubling. This was a hard pill. We've seen many Black men die in the hands of police, but there was something about this one that just sparked. Like, it was just so hard to witness. Like, you have a grown man at one point asking for his mother and being treated like an animal, like worse than an animal. No animal would have been treated like that. And for many of us, it was a wake-up call. For me, it was a wake-up call. Regardless, we all got to do more to address this, to quash it. This is it was a clear message that we collectively, white, Black, whatever race we are, we need to address this head on. And this doctor right here, her name is Dr. Chika Oriwa. She was one she was the only Black student in a medical class of 256 in Toronto, our most diverse city. And she, this woman is incredible. She was like, this ain't right. And despite being attacked and dismissed, she essentially set up a Black stream for medicine at University of Toronto, which now admits roughly around 20 to 25 Black medical students per year. And she took this on. She was the first Black valedictorian, female Black valedictorian in the country in medical for her medical class, and she was an absolute change maker. And so we had her on our show, and it was a real wake up call for me that I want to do more. If this medical student, or at the time she was just graduating from medical school, if she could do this, someone that's mid career like myself, we got to do more. So it was a real motivator to apply for department head, to get a seat at the table, to represent and be a voice. And one of the probably one of the things I'm most proud of was we set up our own Black mentorship program, and this is another Kwajo. He was our very first mentee, and this past year he got into 4 medical schools, and he decided to go to University of Ottawa, which is, so we'll still see him, which is great from my perspective. And now we're up to about 20 mentees. So three of them got into medical school this year. And like I said, it was our time that we felt like we wanted to make a difference, and this is how we're going to do it. And the decision, by the way, once again, to start this mentorship program was a couple days. I said, I called up my admin. I'm like, well, let's figure, I don't know how we're going to do this. Let's just do this. Put something on the website, put a form on the website, start to get it. We initially had 2 or 3, and now we're up to 20, I believe 25, and we're a registered nonprofit now. Another one during the pandemic that we had a bit of, we obviously, as I mentioned, a lot of people were down in the dumps from a morale perspective, and we wanted to do something to boost morale. So, and people wanted to give back, and we wanted to also wanted to support the community. There was a lot of businesses that were obviously lacking business and funds. So to support the community and also support the hospital staff, we set up a GoFundMe for Feed the Frontline Staff, raised about $33,000 in a short period of time. Once again, this was a Monday. I heard about an area in Toronto doing something similar. Texted my team, was like, do you think we could set this up? So Tuesday we start the process. Thursday I make a local news appearance saying we're doing this. I think the first day we raised close to 10,000. It was incredible. But it was one of those things, once again, acts, not getting too caught up in how do we do this better? What's the ideal way to do it? It was, we're going to move first and learn as we go. All right, I think as I alluded to, that was a stressful time, but man, we haven't seen this level of burnout in our profession I've never seen this level of burnout in healthcare. The amount of people leaving the profession, and the pandemic was obviously a catalyst for many, but there was some obvious underlying issues, and I'll have to give the story. I was in the ICU April 2021. It was our third wave. It was the third wave of the pandemic, and it was the wave that we were busy. Like that, we had a lot of patients coming in from Toronto, and we were all sleeping in hospital at this point. Like we're in house doing call, and it was 3 a.m, and I was with our respiratory therapist, who is like You typically stoic, like nothing bothers them. And we're trying to decide whether to intubate a patient. And the reason it was a stressful decision at that wave with the level of the disease, patients, if you intubate them, they're there for 3 weeks guaranteed. Like it's the long haul, right? And when we're discussing this, they start crying. The respiratory therapist starts crying, and she's like, "Kwajo, like it's my 5th night in a row. We're seeing all these patients on vents. They're away from their families. It's just getting a lot. It's heavy." And I knew if this RT was struggling, so many others are struggling. And we knew we had this grant percolating for Solving Well. It's a virtual platform to try and reduce burnout amongst our healthcare providers. So we launched that 2 weeks later. I was like, we got to do something. So what it was you had a virtual format where we had exercises, workouts, yoga, stress management tips, nutrition tips, recipes, uh, access to a clinical psychologist for stress management, advice on how to sleep, all on one platform to try and improve morale, to reduce the amount of burnout. And once again, it was just a need to feel like we need to do something, and no sense waiting and trying to do it in a perfect fashion. It's just, let's get this out there and let's see how many people we can help. The other aspect of things that I personally have a lot of joy in covering was, as I was talking to you guys about, we saw a lot of metabolic disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity during the pandemic. And I had the huge epiphany when it comes to the approach of how do we reduce spending and improve care. Seeing how many people came in with quote unquote preventable disease, to me, it was clear that we got to put some energy into this. If you can avoid somebody coming into an ICU from whether it was COVID or from complications of diabetes or respiratory disease, like their whole trajectory in life is changed. Like if I think of our COVID patients, no, if I were doing it in person, I would grill you guys, but the average cost of a COVID admission was $50,000 for an ICU COVID patient. And then you look at some of the indirect costs of loved ones taking time off work, the patients often not going back to work, their functional status afterwards is significant. You have associated pain disorders, PTSD, anxiety, all from that admission, right? But if we invested or spend more time on the preventative side to avoid patients coming in with similar issues, wow, like think about that. Like think about what you could do with that $50,000 if it was allocated to prevention. Hey, you get access to a holistic nutritionist. You get access to somebody that can help you with your exercise programs, your physiotherapist if needed. This is where my head has gone since the epiphany, or seeing what we were seeing during the pandemic. And on our platforms, like Liz was mentioning how we're active on social media and on our podcast. This has been a huge pivot for me. How you eat, how you move, how you reduce your stress, how you create a sense of community. That's the path forward as far as I'm concerned. So putting that all together, that's our book that Liz mentioned, on apologetic leadership, and thanks for the plug, Liz. It really was the end product of trying to say, hey, these are the lessons we learned from our journey in leadership. These are some of the principles, and which we'll talk about in a second here. But this was another way of getting that word out to try and motivate folks that they can be a catalyst for change. They could be that person that innovates. And so we want it, like, it's one thing to say it, it's one thing to put it on a podcast, but some people prefer it in print, and it's been a very incredible experience writing the book and also just seeing how people's responses. All right, so the fun part, lessons. Just making sure I'm on schedule. Okay, lessons here. Okay, number one, I'm going to keep preaching this because it's the most important thing. Action, action, action. We are a lot of type A's in this room. We want things to be perfect. We fear failure. You have a plan. You have an idea that could help many. What's the next step that you could do to enable that? Ask yourself that. Don't get too caught up in, hey, do we need this super action plan first? Do we need, should we talk to, all these experts before we start initiating? Like, obviously do your diligence, but don't let that voice inside you just say, hey, we should wait, overwhelm you. If you're gonna, any successes that we've had in life has been related to being on that button, deciding to act. I think also it's important to keep in mind, like, really allow your values to dictate your actions. Don't get overwhelmed with the worst case scenario. A lot of the people in the room here, you're here to serve others, to be compassionate, to reach as many Albertans and patients as possible, to reduce their pain and suffering. That's the value. Not so much, oh, my supervisor might not like that, or how's that going to look based, how's this plan going to appear when I present it in front of my group. Your actions need to be really steeped in your actions and your decisions really need to be steeped in your values. And when they do, only good things happen. Do not let failure overwhelm you. I have failed at so many aspects, whether it is getting into medical school, whether it was the amount of papers that got rejected, grants that got rejected, programs that we've initiated that have not gone well. But every time we swing the bat, we learn. Everything that we've tried, there's lessons from that. As an example, when we, from a grant perspective, all those failures, all those multiple failures from submitting grants, every time we've learned something, and now we're much more successful when applying for grants. So look at it as a way of learning, as opposed to quote unquote failure. A lot of upper management might not be happy with this one, but don't wait for permission to act. If you are steeped in your values, you are thinking of the best interest, often waiting for permission will slow you down, and there's going to be naysayers, there's going to be people that don't want to see you succeed. Once again, when you have the option, act. You could always ask for forgiveness later. I'll give you an example. Like, I got a bit of heat for that feed the frontline staff that I set up. And I'm sure I brought this up from my foundation, so it's not like this is news to them. But yeah, they would have much preferred that I did the fundraiser through the hospital foundation. But I knew deep down, if I asked for permission, this would have been weeks down the road. This would have been a much slower process. And so I said, sorry, next time. But as a result, a lot of businesses got supported, and 30,000+ was raised. So I wouldn't change anything. Agility, this is something that you guys should take pride in. Not getting too set in your ways, not getting too focused on an answer, but more focused on an outcome. Like, what is the truth? Getting down to the truth. And we saw this during the pandemic, which is something I hope we maintain during like moving forward. that we had interventions that we thought were going to be effective that weren't effective, and we pivoted quickly. And we need to keep that ability to be nimble to really make changes in people's lives. So this one, like thinking outside the box and creative courage, the lesson here is you really need to provide an environment where it's okay for people to give ideas. It's okay for people to think outside the box. I'll give you a clinical example. I'll do it briefly. I know that I'm up on time, but there was a case where in the ICU where a patient, they were in a halo, somehow self-extubated, and they were strugglers, like their airway was closing in on them. And we called for help, called for anesthesia overhead. No one was coming, so it was me and my staff having to do this, like try and get the tube back in. We're doing it with the fiber optically or with the bronchoscope. Sorry if this is too much detail for the super non-clinical, but ultimately the short version is a respiratory therapist. We were struggling to get this in, but a respiratory therapist had felt that the ability to voice an idea, like, hey, can we ventilate through the nose? Like, I'll spare you the details on how we achieve that. But them speaking up and feeling comfortable speaking up literally saved that patient's life. And this is what we need to do within our teams, within our organizations, is create an environment where it's safe to speak, that people feel that they can have the creative solution. Because often we feel like, depending on where you are, it's not always well received. This is one of my absolute favorite episodes ever on our show, was with the former dean of School of Business at Rotman. His name is Roger Martin, and he really has taken hold of this concept called integrative thinking. And this is a model for how you come up with creative solutions. So a lot of us are A/B thinking, black or white. Like, say if we're trying to set up a conference like this one, okay? People think either we got to do it in person. Option A is in person. Option B is virtual, right? And so the debate often happens is like, should we go with A or should we go with B? Roger's concept is, what's the best part of the in-person conference? What are the best parts of that? And what are the best parts of the virtual conference? And why don't we combine them? Find a way to make it our own unique solution here. And when you think about setting up a program, setting up a conference, having educational initiatives, there's infinite ways of approaching it when you think of things integratively. Think of models that work, that you think are options, and take the best aspects of those and see if you can marry them. This, to me, yeah, once again, it's just it's a way of really thinking outside the box. And because of time, I'm going to just skip over a couple things. The self-leadership aspect is really a component where you really think about what brought you to your profession. It's a real antidote for burnout. Why do you want to be the clinician? And lean in on that when you're burnt out or when times are tough. For me, it was always connection with patients and their families. So when things get tough, take that extra time to connect and really reconnect with your why, essentially. All right, the last thing I'll say real quick is, whatever initiatives that you're taking part of, you got to get the word out. As I was alluding to, when you got that academic paper, without that knowledge translation piece, without thinking about how to spread the word, it's not going to make as much impact as you're hoping. So in this era, whether you put it on your YouTube channel, get it on a podcast, get on social media, get on people's newsletters, that is essential if you really want to get that word out and expand your reach. I think that is all I'm going to say for now. This is how you get, this is where all our stuff is, our newsletter, our social media, and thank you. Okay, what I'm saying about knowledge translation for real is you all have a duty to do this, to get the word out. I honestly, I don't feel like it's enough just to have that paper out. Like whether it's going on a podcast, whether it's doing active on social media, your YouTube, getting on people's newsletters, think of creative ways of getting the word out, because this is how you're going to make a difference. If someone hears about, if I'm now hearing about that chronic pain solution or whatever that's going on in Alberta, I see that on social media. I go to my CEO, I go to whoever my boss is and say, hey, have you seen what they're doing here? Why can't we do something similar? So I this might be a strong statement, but I think we have a duty to try and get the word out when you have such amazing initiatives. And then I was, just for the sake of time, I mean, it is worth saying that leading, if you're gonna, when is always important to lead by example. That's just my personal opinion, and this is how you get a hold of us. We have a newsletter on Substack. Anywhere you look at Quadcast, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, we're everywhere. And thank you very much. Ta-da.
So we are open for questions, and I just want to say a huge thank you. And I think there's been a lot of messages over the last couple of days that have been about that action piece. And I think we can often identify, and especially when the conversations around healthcare burnout were happening, it was a lot about the infrastructure and the shortages and what we can't access and how we don't have enough of anything. And I think it's a tremendous inspiration to hear that in the midst of being an ICU doc and having your team at the Ottawa Hospital in the midst of a pandemic and taking actions and not focusing on the shortages, but focusing on the possibilities. So we have a question.
Well, thank you very much for your talk. I feel almost like we're kindred spirits. Maybe you're a brother from your mother or something like that. But you're talking about something that I talk about on a regular basis, and I feel sometimes too often it falls on deaf ears. So I've written a question for you so that I could hopefully get right. So here it goes. As you said, fear of failure prevents referrals or acceptance of programs or treatments that are not air quotes evidence-based or outside of a person's scope or even their bias. How can you direct the important people in this group that could refer but see hurdles to this action due to their type A desire to keep things perfect?
Well, number one, thanks for the love. I must say I had a bit of trouble hearing the question. But I think it was like, how do you get people to? Sorry, maybe Liz, could you?
I go back. Okay, so the specific question. Oh, I'm loud now. How can you direct the important people in this group that could refer but see hurdles to their actions due to their type A desire to keep things perfect for their client?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love the question. How do you overcome it? I think, to me, it's all about baby steps. Like, what is the first and maybe little action that you could do to move something forward? And what it is momentum. Those people will get momentum. They'll realize, well, okay, wow, I did do it. I was able to do this. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but we're still that much further ahead. So it's, to me, when you're dealing with a lot of the type A's, I guess I'm supposed to be type A, but I'm not super type A. When you do see that you can accomplish something, like even if it's a small feat, it just gains confidence. It gains confidence and it gains momentum, and it's like that positive reinforcement. So that's what I often say to, because my team, like I'm leading 20 plus type A docs as an ICU department head. So I just say, I got these big ideas, but not everyone's willing to make leaps, right? So it's when leading, it's okay, let's try this baby step. How did it go? And they're like, okay, this is all right. I'm feeling an ability to exhale. And then we move forward, and before you know it, you're making some significant change.
Hi, thanks a lot for your talk. One of the things that I really liked was your idea of the ability to voice an idea, within your team and within the community. And how do you set up that idea of distributed leadership within a hierarchical organization that doesn't always support change agents? How do you work that way? Because I mean, there's like NHS as leading from the edge, where they take innovative groups and they find ideas and then they try to spread. But how do you do that in a provincial setting or even interprovincial? Just wondering your thoughts.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. The two things come up for me. It's one, the easy answer is your leaders need to embrace this. They need to create an environment for this, where the whoever is in charge directly above you or like direct from the top has to harness this value of an open relationship. A lot of solutions come from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. So that's the easier answer, which doesn't always exist. The second one that this is what we've really used, is just create the change at a small scale to show almost like proof of concept. Like just a personal example is my research platform. Nobody really wanted to support a research platform that looked at costs. A lot of hardcore researchers didn't really believe in that as something that anybody would care about. So what I did was just, I'll start small. I'll start with some systematic reviews. I'll pay my own research assistant to help me produce these papers, and then like get the word out when the papers were published, and then it's hard for people not to get to not take notice when there's been some positive impact. So you don't have to necessarily create that program that's going to be, citywide or provincial wide, but can you do it on a ward? Can you do it for a division? You know what I'm saying? And especially in an era where you often have like QI funding or smaller grants, or often you think of an innovative way to do it with little money. You know what I'm saying? So or an innovative way to present the data when, like, especially Alberta, the amount of data available through the one EMR is wonderful. So that would be my advice, which is probably the more realistic one in 2023, is just start small and show proof of concept. Otherwise, it does have to come from the leaders above.
I think it's really fantastic to have those pieces, because I remember in grad school being told about Roger Bannister, and a lot of you may not know who Roger Bannister is. But way back when in England, it was thought that you could physically not run a 4-minute mile. That was just not possible at all. It's physically impossible. And Roger Bannister was like, I don't think so. So he trained and trained and trained, and he broke the 4-minute mile. And when he did that, it was world news. Yet none of us in this room probably knew about Roger Bannister, or maybe a few of you. And the reality, burner. Yay. And the reality is, what Roger Bannister did, besides running a 4-minute mile, was he made something that everyone thought was impossible, possible. And in doing that, he immediately created a world of people where running a 4-minute mile was now not really a big deal. And it was because somebody did one little thing, that proof of concept, that turned something that we all view as impossible into something that's possible. And I think that's such a huge piece that each one of us has the capacity to do. Not that I can run a 4-minute mile, but Kwajo, maybe you could.
Oh, hell no. No, I can't do it. Yeah, I'm broken and old. But but that point though is sometimes it gets forgot. Well, not forgotten, but not highlighted enough that once he broke it, then a lot of people start to break it. Like it was a mindset shift. So that it says a lot.
Well, thank you so much. We are so honored you could join us. I'm sorry you couldn't be here in person, and maybe we'll get to see each other again one day.
That'd be amazing, Liz. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. And keep hustling. Your work is so important. As a palliative care doc, I can't tell you how much what you guys are doing and is going to make a dramatic impact on people's lives. So thank you.